Blended families.
That's the Full Employment Act for private fiduciaries and corporate trustees.
Blended families. Wow, there is so much to cover.
There are lots of them out there. So it used to be, I guess, years and years and years ago when I was kind of this high, that didn't happen very often. But I'm not sure what the latest statistics are, but it's like 50 or 60% of marriages in California, end in divorce. And then in a situation like that, people go their own separate ways.
Sure.
But then you're in a situation where you have an estate plan that has to take into account of offspring from different marriages.
Yes.
And that's where things get kind of complicated, and that's where the issue of trust.
Right.
Really
I have a
jumps in.
blended family, so I'm completely sympathetic to these concerns that people have. I want to make sure that I'm providing for my spouse, but I also want to protect my kids from my
Right.
first marriage. And so many things that can happen here. So many times from an estate planning attorney perspective, I can protect people with setting up separate trusts. I can do a joint trust with a spouse, separate trust for each child or groups of children. But tell me about how First American can solve this blended family issue.
Well, I think oftentimes when you have a surviving spouse, and interesting enough, especially in Orange County, although I think it's maybe not unique to Orange County, but we certainly see our fair shares.
Yes.
That surviving spouse, I'm going to say typically, because women live longer than men, so I'm not meaning to pick on men, but men
But
usually,
it's true.
But it's true. And you might have a situation where that surviving spouse, that second, could be a third. We've dealt with fourth and fifth spouses as well.
I've seen eighth.
That gets really, really interesting sometimes. I think I could write a screenplay and make a lot of money up in Hollywood if I had some of these stories that I could disclose, but I can't because we have that duty of confidentiality.
We do.
But you're in a situation where that surviving spouse will be vested with discretion if he or she is the trustee. And when they exercise that discretion, they can exercise that discretion right down the line in a perfect capacity, or they could kind of deviate to the left or deviate to the right. Because when someone needs to have health, well, what exactly does that mean? It might be a defined term, it might not be a defined term. Your TROC documents are great. There are other folks out there whose documents might be less great, shall we say.
And you've got to follow them.
And we've got to interpret those documents in light of the facts and circumstances that we see them in. We're a corporate trustee. We don't have an axe to grind. You can well imagine if a situation where I'm in a situation where, health means I like to get maybe this lifted up a little bit and do this right here and do that, and it's not going to be 10 grand, it's going to be 25 or 30 grand. And that's entirely appropriate. And all of a sudden you see that balance in the decedent's trust going down and down and down and down because
Right.
their exercise of discretion might have a little bit of self-motivation involved. And then you have the kids from the deceased spouse kind of shaking their heads, sometimes getting upset, and sometimes getting upset enough to actually contact an attorney, and then things start to get ugly and get expensive. So it's kind of nice to have someone just kind of go down the middle. Again, you don't have an axe to grind. You can call balls balls and strikes, and that strike zone is pretty well defined. And
Right.
again, that can be a real benefit. There's other situations where everyone gets along great. There are those kumbaya moments out there, in which case it's really there's no
Yes.
need for us.
Those are nice.
Those are nice to have, but again, that situation, and you know what the dynamics are, and if you're true to yourself, you know when it's appropriate to get someone else involved.
Right.
Because you don't want to have that situation where you leave just a challenging situation where everyone's going to be fighting. That's not good estate planning. That's the antithesis of estate planning. That's kind of conflict planning.